Hey everybody, it's Tanya here. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be playing with one of my favorite mediums, and that is the Ecoline liquid watercolors. They're a lot of fun and they have beautiful intense colors. I really wanted something that reminded me of the feeling and essence of May, and that's sort of what we're going to play around with today. I also really like to suggest getting yourself some dedicated synthetic brushes because the inks are wonderful, but as you can see, they kind of stain your fingers and your brushes, so you want to have something that you don't have to worry about later on. Now, as we get started, we're just going to do a rough drafted outline of some flower petals, and I'm going to try and angle the paper here so you can see just the way, there we go. So you can see the way that the water is touching the surface, and the idea is to create some damp areas and then the ink will flow into them. Now, very easy, simple shapes, nothing too structured, nothing too tight. The whole point of it is really just to get the shape of a flower and then to let the areas flow into each other. Now again, you don't have to use the same supplies as me. I'm going to start with a lighter beige in the Ecoline 374. If you've got just watercolors, that works really well too. And what we're doing is just popping some ink in just to define where the petals and the edges are, and then the center of the flower. And as we begin to put more color down, we're going to join the sections together and the ink will flow from one area to the next. Next up is probably my favorite color, which is the 390. It's like a very soft, cool blush pink, and it loves the water and the color spread all over, and it's really pretty. The one tip I will share is that you want to start with your lightest colors and then go darker. You can go light colors on dark, but you aren't going to get the same effect. And in this situation, we really want things to layer and the ink to move into different sections. And throughout the process, we're going to be layering color on top of color and just monitoring the paper so it's not too wet or too dry, and then just going and adding more colors. The next one to come up is this beautiful 507. It's like a deep, deep purple blue color. I love this one. It's going to go down quite dark, but trust me, these colors always look so much lighter when they dry. I like to use it from my palette instead of going directly onto the page because it's quite small, and as you're going to see in a moment, this particular color has a very big spread, meaning that the color loves to travel, so we can use just a little bit. Remember, we're going to layer on top of layer while the paper is still damp. Now I've worked my way around the outsides on the tips of the petals, and now we are going into the center of the flower. There's two reasons for this. First off, many flowers have a darker center, but for the painting, it's going to help give it a sense of depth so it doesn't look so flat. And once we've got that, we can begin to play around. I'm just brushing some lines and some color into other parts of the petal. And as we begin to layer a little bit more, different colors will blend together. You'll get some interesting textures and the ink will just blend into itself. So this is time to play and see what we can come up with and just keep going with the process using a little bit of symmetry. And then when we get to a point where it's semi-dry, starting to go back in to the edges and just adding more of the darker color, again giving us that sense of depth, almost like the petals are curling back away from you. Okay, here we are at about 10 minutes later, and you can see it's dried a little bit more. I'm making sort of a gray black color just for a little bit of depth in the center, trying to darken it up, but also creating a bit of color separation by just adding a new pigment in there. You can see the edges of the petals are still wet, and the very center is wet because there was a lot of color there. And again, we're just trying to create that sense of symmetry around the center, and I'm going to start just adding some random spots and a little bit more color buildup. And then we're going to start to create a bit of character in the petals by moving the ink around a little bit. If you've got an area that dries out a bit, you can put a bit of water down and then begin to add some pigment, and you'll be able to sort of layer on top. In this particular moment, I put too much liquid down, so in a second I'm going to pull out a dropper, and there we go, and then just pull some of the extra out, and that's really easy. The other way, of course, is always to use a brush that you've got wet and then dry it off, and it'll act a bit like a sponge as well. Oh, I like how this is looking. So I'm going to use the 700 now and begin to darken up the center of the flower. Again, I'm going to put some into my palette and then put the brush into the watercolor so that it's not too intense and too much at once. And this way I can just drop it in a little bit and then begin to take a bit more of that darker color to the outside of the petals, and then a couple of different dots here and there, a little bit of marks here and there, just to give it some differentiation and some character. Okay, here's a fun technique. We are going to use the top of a pin and use it to scrape very lightly into the paper, which will move the ink around. It will give the impression of the veins in the petals, and it's also a really fun way, if you do it quite lightly, you're still going to have the ink move into the troughs that are created by the impression of the pin, or whatever surface you've got. You can use an old fork or anything that's got a pointy end that you're not worried about using for food again. And we're going to just draw some lines. Try not to do them all perfectly even. If they're a little bit kooky and a little bit jagged and a little bit swirly, that's perfect. The whole point of this really is to have a bit of character, a bit of fun, and we're creating some movement in the way that the petals are looking. So just experiment a little bit, and if it's not something you're happy with, don't worry, because we can keep adding and playing around with it. And remember, things are always perfectly imperfect. Now at this point, the painting is pretty much done, and we're just going to add a little bit more detail, a little more zhuzh. I really love this part of the painting. The paper is damp. The watercolors have mixed together. You can begin to add a little bit more color and layer. And what I'm doing is putting a little bit more of the brown mixed with some pink, so it's almost like a dark salmon-y color. And you'll notice in plants that when the leaves begin to get older, they go a little bit yellow, a little bit brown. So it gives it a bit of realism in a very abstract picture, but also, again, here we have this visual interest. Your eye is not sitting in one place, it's moving around, and we have some interesting things happening with the color. Because if the whole thing is just those three colors and they're all very similar layout, it can be a little boring. So this just makes things a little bit interesting, a little bit more unique. So play around and see what you can come up with. So we are pretty much done, except for my last step, which is putting a bit of an edge on the petals that are quite pale. When you're doing any paintings, always be sure you take a good 10 to 15 feet step back so you can see what it'll look like on the wall. And I didn't like that there was a big white space, so I'm just adding a little edge. And with that, we are ready to let it dry and then move on to the next step. Looks pretty good, don't you think? Okay, here we are in Canva. And the beauty of using this app is that you can create a lot of really amazing things for free. Now, all you have to do is a search for calendar, desktop, or wallpaper, or phone wallpaper, or iPhone wallpaper, and you'll get tons and tons of results. The one that I'm using is called the Brown Minimalist 2025 Year Calendar Desktop Wallpaper. So if you haven't yet, grab your dry painting, take a great photograph of it, try all sorts of different angles, use different lenses on your phone, get really close, pull back a little bit, try using the macro lens. And when you have a bunch of pictures, look and see at what you've got. Don't forget that you can go in close, you can crop, you can do all sorts of things. So you just have to play a little bit. I've put a bunch of them into my upload section. So on the left side, you can see in the margin about halfway down, uploads. So we're going to click on that. And there's all the options. So I put in 9 different options, but I played around with this a little bit beforehand. And the one that I really like is this one. And all I have to do is click it and drag it right on top of the month. And then I'm just going to angle it and then make it way bigger so that it actually fits. And then there's a great menu above which gives you a lot of different options, and I don't like the way that this looks, so what I'm going to do is actually flip it horizontal. For some reason when I hit horizontal it goes vertical, but yeah, you'll figure it out. And then flip it around, and there we go. And then I'm just going to look at that and say, do I like the way that that looks? It is, it's quite pretty, but I feel like I can't actually read the dates on the right hand side. So I'm going to make it a bit larger and just shimmy it into place so that I can actually read the dates when this is on my computer. And there we go. And that's it. That's it. It's so simple. Now, if I had this and I didn't want to see the dates, all I have to do is click my graphic, click on position just above. And on the left side, you'll see we have forward or to front. So I'm going to click to front, and there we go. And now I can download that and it doesn't show the dates. Now, if you want to see a little bit more of the surface area, just turn off your uploads by clicking the button again on the far left corner. Please remember I'm doing this on an iPad, so you might see something a little different if you're on a laptop or on your phone, but basically it's the same menus. So I played with this a little bit. I moved the position around by flipping it and then making it larger and shifting it into place. And I really like how that looks. I think it's gorgeous. And all I have to do now is download it. They give you tons of options for downloading, and I'm going to make it really simple. And I'm just going to say, all right, instead of doing all these pages, just the current page that I'm working on, please, which is number 4. And I'm going to choose a JPEG, because the PNG files are very, very large and super crisp, but they're a little bit big for downloading. They're better for print. So I like to go for a JPEG that's about 90 quality, which is still really, really clear. And that's it. Click download, and there it goes. And you can save the image directly. And that's it. You're done. And here we have the finished painting. Now I did add a couple little dots with a sparkle gold gel pen just for a little extra, because that's me. And that is how we go from a painting into a digital download that you can use on your phone or your desktop, share with friends, or just enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do give me a thumbs up as a like. If you want to learn more about me, you can head over to art.tanyakucey.com, and don't forget to go to the subscribe page and sign up for the Art Notes newsletter, and then you too will get a free digital download of my paintings every single month. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I will see you guys in the next video.